Yesterday, we stopped reading after this table, the 6 sense bases, 6 internal and the corresponding external, and what are the consciousness arise from the sense bases. Briefly, the 6 internal sense bases, all the sense bases we are having. Eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. What is the external? The corresponding senses that we use to the corresponding objects that we use to use for the senses, so to speak. For eye, and the external sense basis would be all the forms that we see. For ear, it's whatever we hear, all the sounds that we hear. For nose, whatever we smell through the nose. For tongue, whatever we taste with the tongue. For the body, whatever we touch with the tactile objects. And for the mind, is the mental phenomena, which will be explored in the next paragraph. What exactly is that about? What the first 5 sense bases and their objects signify is obvious enough. Why is it obvious enough? Because we can directly experience all those 5 because we are having all those 5 senses. But the 6th pair, mind, mano, and phenomena, dharma, presents some difficulty. If we treat the 2 terms as parallel to the other internal and external bases, we will understand the mind base to be the support for the arising of mind consciousness, mano vijnana, and the phenomena base to be the objective sphere of mind consciousness. On this interpretation, mind might be taken as the passive flow of consciousness from which active conceptual consciousness emerges. And phenomena as purely mental objects, such as those apprehended by introspection, imagination, and reflection. The Abhidhamma and the Pali commentaries, however, interpret the 2 terms differently. They hold that the mind base comprises all classes of consciousness. That is, they include within it all 6 types of consciousness. They also hold that all actual entities not comprised in the other sense bases constitute the phenomena base. The phenomena base then includes the other 3 mental aggregates. Feeling, perception, and volitional formations, as well as types of subtle material form not implicated in experience through the physical senses. Whether this interpretation conforms to the meaning intended in the oldest Buddhist text is an open question. So even among the scholars and the text, there is some difference of what exactly the mind is about in these 6 sense bases. So for now, we can just keep it as an open question. Sister Saikyang, would you like to continue?
Text 9, section 4.2a, testifies that for early Buddhism, liberation requires direct knowledge and full understanding of the internal and external sense bases and all the phenomena that arise from them. This seems to establish an apparent correspondence between Buddhism and empirical science, but the type of knowledge sought by the 2 disciplines differs. Whereas the scientist seeks impersonal objective information. The Buddhist practitioner seeks direct insight into the nature of these phenomena as components of life or lived experience.
Okay, thanks, Sister Second. Direct knowledge and full understanding of the sense basis and all the phenomena that arise from them is the requirement for liberations. Here, this is interesting. There is an apparent correspondence and parallel between Buddhism and empirical science. In what way? The scientist seeks impersonal objective information, but Buddhist practitioners seek direct insight into the nature of this phenomena, not as objective information, but as components of lived experience, as our direct experience. So that is the main difference between the scientist and the Buddhist, is the type of objective information we seek. So you will see scientists experiment in the lab, mixing all the chemicals, assembling all the gears. But for us Buddhists, our lab is inside here. It's inside our mind. And this is where we experiment, trace all our defilements and remove them. That is the goal. Sister Chai Guan, would you like to continue?
The Nikayas suggest an interesting difference between the treatment given to the aggregates and the sand bases. Both serve as the soil where clinging takes root and grows. But while the aggregates are primarily the soil for view about a cell, the sand bases are primarily the soil for craving. A necessary step in the conquest of craving is therefore restraining of the senses. Monks and nuns, in particular, must be vigilant in their encounters with desirable and undesirable sense-based objects. When one is negligent, experience through the senses invariably becomes a trigger for craving. Lust for pleasant objects, aversion toward disagreeable objects, and a craving for pleasant escape routes, and a down attachment to neutral objects. Thank you.
Okay, I'm muted. Thanks, Sister Chai Guan. I had this question before too, like, why did the Buddha expound the 5 aggregates and also the 6 sense bases? Because if we have direct insight into either the 5 aggregates or the 6 sense bases, we will also be liberated. So why is there a need to expound these two groups, these 2 different groups? So here Bhikkhu Bodhi mentioned an interesting difference between the treatment of these 2, given to the aggregates and the sense bases. Both, okay, this is the similarity, both serve as the soil where clinging takes roots and grows. I like this. But the aggregates are primarily the soil for views about the self. Sense bases are primarily soil for craving. So the difference that I also noticed that the 6 sense bases, the 5 of them consist more all about all our physical body, everything attached to our body, and that's why there is more craving focus, because craving arises through these 5 senses. While the 5 aggregates, only the first one, form, is about the body, And all the other 4 is all about the something in the mind. Perception, volitional formation, consciousness, and feeling. These 4 all related to the mind. So that's why the aggregates focus more to counter the views about the self, while the sense basis, when it is expounded, is to counter craving. So different disciples will get a different teachings accordingly. If the disciples have more craving, then the Buddha would probably use the 6 sense basis. If the disciple has a stronger feels about self, then the Buddha would use the 5 aggregates. Sister Seng Hui, would you like to continue?
In one of his earliest discourse, popularly known as the Fire Sermon, text 9, section 4.2b, the Buddha declared that all is burning. The all is just the 6 senses, the objects, the types of consciousness arising from them, and the related contexts and feelings. The way to liberation is to see that this all is burning with the fires of defilements and suffering. The Salayatana Samudata repeatedly states that to dispel ignorance and generate true knowledge, we must contemplate all the sense bases and the feelings that arise through them as impermanent, suffering, and non-self. This, according to text 9, section 4.2c, is the direct way to the attainment of Nibbana. An alternative route commanded by text 9, section 4.2d, is to see that the 6 senses are empty of a self or of anything belonging to a self. Since consciousness arises via the 6 sense bases, it too is devoid of self. Text 9, section 4.2e.
Thanks, Sister Seng Hui. The Fire Sermon is actually one of the pretty famous sutta. Has any of you read this before? Fire Sermon? No, that's good. Then we will read it later in the sutta. The Buddha declared that all is burning. And this sutta is also showing the Buddha's skillfulness in adapting his teaching. The reason the Buddha used the simile of fire is because the listeners were described as fire worshippers. So the Buddha used a fire, an object that's familiar to them, and they use it as the subject of teaching to point out about the defilements, the fires of defilements and suffering. Okay, we will take a look again. And this one, we mentioned that the 6 senses are empty of a self, or anything belonging to a self. So if you're wondering where does the emptiness that's emphasized very strongly in the Mahayana teachings come from, it actually comes from sutta, the source itself. But the Mahayana just loves to put much more emphasis on the teaching of emptiness, while in the Pali Canon it's only mentioned a few times in the sutta. But still, it's nice to know that it has its source in the Pali Canon. Sister Aikim, would you like to continue?
9, section 4.3, the elements. The elements are the subject of the Dhatu Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 14. The word elements, Dhatu, is applied to several quite disparate groups of phenomena, and thus the suttas in this chapter fall into separate clusters with little in common, but are concerned with entities called elements. The most important groups consist of 18, 4 and 6 elements. The 18 elements are an elaboration of the 12 sense bases. They consist of the 6 sense faculties, the 6 sense objects, and the 6 types of sense consciousness. Since 6 types of consciousness have been extracted from the mind base, the mind element that remains must be a simpler type of cognitive event. The Nikayas do not specify its precise function. The Abhidhamma identifies it with a type of consciousness that fulfills more rudimentary roles in the process of cognition than the more discriminative mind consciousness element. 9. Section 4.3a contains a simple enumeration of the 18 elements. Contemplation of these elements help to dispel the notion that an abiding subject underlies the changing contents of experience. It shows how experience consists of different types of consciousness, each of which is conditioned, horizon, is dependent on its own specific sense, faculty, and object. Thus, to ascertain the composite, diversified, conditioned nature of experience dispels the illusion of unity and solidity that ordinarily obscures correct cognition.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Hakim. So this one is all about the 18 elements. What are the 18 elements? 6 sense faculties, plus the 6 sense objects, plus the 6 types of consciousness, of sense consciousness. Okay. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Any questions or comments from what we have read so far?
Maybe I just say something regarding what we have read about the 6 sense space and then the objects and also the consciousness. So a lot of emphasis has been on this because just now we read, right, the path to liberation, is knowing impermanence and then dukkha, suffering and not self. Plus, whenever there's any contact arises from all these 6 sense space, if we can, directly know that all these actually are also impermanent, suffering and not self, and then we don't cling onto it, then the craving will cease. So this is the, in Chinese called the 入手处, the place where we have to work on it. So in our everyday experience, we have to, moment by moment, clearly know whenever any of the 6 sense contact with the object consciousness arise, then gives you that feeling, that pleasant, that painful and all that, and then you can see the arising and ceasing, and then you can know the not self and don't get attached to it. So the other day I sent a message, right? So when we go through our daily experiences, it's like watching a movie. So watch, Venerable Chun say, watch, observe, and then be objective. If you are not be objective, you still can watch, but you get involved in it, and then you don't have this objective mind. You thought that this is my experience. This is, I am seeing it. This belongs to me. This is my object, that kind of thing. So Yeah, we have to be objective. So we just watch, just like watching a movie. You watch a movie, the director already planned everything there, every happening, you just know the details, you know. Oh, this one happened. Oh, okay. This girl meets this boy. Okay, you know. Then something happened. Somebody lost a life, somebody died, then somebody passed away, somebody, you know. So it's just happening. All things are happening just as it is. It's just that we cling on to all this happening as something that either belongs to me, close to me, you know, you want to have something to do with it. That's why you cling on to it. That's where the suffering comes from. So actually we create our own suffering because we want to get involved. We want to have our opinion. We want to have, you know, somebody hear our views, our view, you know, that is why all these things happen. So if you, let's say if you're watching a movie, the director said, okay, everything happened. You have no involvement in it. You will know, this is just acting. This is not real. Why should I cry over it when, you know, something disaster happened and things like that? It's not real. And then it had nothing concerned with me. So I detach the self with the happening. So actually a lot of variables have been trying to teach us that when we are able to see the reality, means we see the happening with no doer, with no involvement in the self. That means you are not the one who is doing. It just happened. Things just happen as it is. So if you let it, just like you watch a river flow, you don't interrupt with it, you just look at it from the above view, you can see the river flowing moment by moment. The water is not the same anymore. It's just another moment, another different water comes, but it looks the same. And you thought that it's permanent. And so we have to go there and you have to reflect on it. Yeah. So reflect, observe, but be objective. Yeah. So that is where we should work. And the path to liberation actually is to really understand from our sixth sense base, when you touch the external object, consciousness arises. It's only there we can remove that ignorance from that contact feeling, and then no clinging. This is where we can, the dependent origination. If you can see every moment without ignorance, without greed, without hatred, without delusion, then you have you are liberated. Yeah. So that's my sharing. It's a very important sutta and very important point here. Yes.
Thanks a lot, Sister Saikyong, for the sharing. I like the analogy of the movie. Some of us actually watch movies with a lot of emotions. Why is that character so stupid? Why did you miss that character? He's just turning to the corner. How can you miss that character walking behind you? But, well, like Saikyong mentioned, we are the actor of our own movie, and we should watch it with detachment. It's just like a movie. Very good analogy. And Saikyong also mentioned about dependent origination, which we will explore in the paragraphs to come. Actually, pardon me, I'd like to just read 2 more paragraphs just to finish off the elements. The 4 elements are earth, water, heat, and air. This represents 4 behavioral modes of matter, each representing earth representing solidity, water representing fluidity, heat representing energy, and air distension, whatever there's space inside the body. The 4 are inseparably united in any unit of matter, from the smallest to the largest and most complex. The elements are not merely properties of the external world, but also of one's own body. Thus, one must contemplate them in relation to one's body, as the Satipatthana Sutta teaches. The 3 suttas combined in text chapter 9, section 4.3b, show that these elements can be viewed as impermanent and conditioned. from the triple standpoint of gratification, danger, and escape, and also by the way of the four truth pattern. Now, what are the 6 elements? The 6 elements include the 4 physical elements, with an addition of the space element and the element of consciousness. Text chapter 9, section 4.3c, a long excerpt from Majjhima Nikaya 140, explains in detail how to contemplate the 6 elements in relation to the physical body, the external world, and conscious experience. With that, we have finished reading about the elements, and next time we will explore dependent origination. Any last words or comments? Okay. If not, the sister simply like to do the dedication.
愿消三障诸烦恼，愿得智慧真明了。我愿罪障悉消除，世世常行菩萨道。阿弥陀佛。
Thanks, Sister Singhui. Till we meet again, we will be guided by the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Have a restful Sunday ahead. Thanks, everyone, and see you guys next time. Bye-bye.